So hi Arjan, are you still with Payaras or you moved to Piranha? So what's the state of the union
Uh,
right now?
yeah, so I left Piara last summer,
Okay.
and I'm now working as an independent contractor.
Ah, I didn't
And
knew that. So I thought they're still working with Payara, and but
uh, no, like after like 3 years, 2.5 years, I moved on.
uh-huh.
I'm still like really friendly with the guys, and but yeah, sometimes it's just time to move on. I wanted to do some independent things.
Yeah, very good.
Um,
So you're a right freelancer like me, right?
yeah. So at the moment, I'm just doing separate contracting jobs.
Hmm.
So a few local here, just working on websites, working with JSF again in practice. So that's kind of nice as well. So for me, working all the time with the internals of the server is quite interesting.
Hmm.
Um, but I also felt that at some point you lose touch with what's actually needed in terms of functionality. So I also like to be involved with actual application development.
Hmm.
So that's one of the reasons. And I, like I said, I like to be involved with the actual practical things, so I know what to feed back into the specs, into the libraries, etc.
This is actually also my observation. So if I talk with the even at the Sun Times, with the Glassfish guys or the Whitefly or whatever. So I came from the project perspective, and they come from the runtime perspective, and my impression was always that they try to micro optimize the server, so which is of course the most important thing. And for me, it was more important to have productive and nice holistic view of the whole thing. So we not always understood each other. This was also funny because usually people think I'm like a Java EE or Jakarta EE fanboy, which is partially true because of the productivity, but from the application server perspective, I was more like the monolithic mindset, and the application server vendors had modules, modularity, micro modules, OSGI dynamic, opinion of the servers, or the goals were completely different, which was actually funny because usually you would expect that someone from outside, would like to modular and pay for what you use, runtime, and the server providers would try, to ship everything at once as a monolithic blob, which was actually not true at all, right? In my case.
Yeah, it's actually quite the other way around. But yeah, it's the same thing as an application developer. I just like to have the entire API available for me when I need it. And yeah, we don't care that much for modularity and for having separate slices of the server available, really. Whether it's like 40 megabytes deployed on a server or 50 or 60 or 80, in practice, it doesn't matter that much.
Yeah,
So of
absolutely.
course,
So this is amazing that you're saying this. So I remember, so you are a Payara and Glassfish guys, so you know the internals. You actually know how big the EJB container is. This is the whole entire OSGI bundle was at least in Glassfish V3 frame, like 1 meg or 680 kilobytes, as I remember. And we had the projects where people ask me, can we just remove the Java server faces because we just have the the backend services and make the application server leaner? So okay, yeah, you could, but I don't think we will save a lot. And this was and it was almost not recognizable. So and you know probably also John Klingen. So it was on the podcast. So we are
yeah.
on the conferences. So we had a chat, and John was like, "What is your opinion now about memory consumption?" I was like, "Yeah, I have to say, I know for me, is the productivity, compatibility is paramount, and not for me, for my clients and me. And if we save something, great, but it's not like we have to save a lot. And if we have to save a lot, we have a complete different problem. Like we have so many services, and my clients have major problems with memory, which are not solvable by optimizing 20% or something like this, right?"
Yeah, indeed. So it's after that quite beneficial to remove something as small as Java server faces from the server. In some cases, it could be beneficial to deactivate a major subsystem like JMS in Wildfly. If you disable that, you do save something. But also, it's not that much really.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you start Wildfly or Piranha, as actually Piranha I measured yesterday at Java user group meeting, and I just connected with Visual VM and deployed a microprofile service. And the overhead was around 60 megs. So if you would connect with JVisual VM and hit the garbage collector, you will see you will consume around 64 megabyte. So you can only save that. And from outside, it looks like it consumes half a gig. And the reason was the settings -XMX. So this is why it appears so big. But you can tune it a little bit. So from the 60 meg, even if save 50%, so then we are at around 30 megs, and this couldn't be a problem. So if we have a problem, is this the entire JVM, right? So it's okay if we just get rid of the entire JVM and go, towards assembler C or Go. But this is a completely different discussion. So okay, now sure we can do this, but I don't think we will be as productive as we are with Jakarta EE, Java EE microprofile, right?
Yeah, true. And even in things like C++, or C, if you do get into long-running server processes, the speed difference is not always that much, since Java does optimize when it runs longer and harder.
Yeah.
But then it doesn't matter that much still.
We had it already. So we were in the C++ and C space already, and we moved to Java because it was really hard to maintain the old C and C++ application. And the history just repeats.
I've actually been a C++ developer for quite some time before I moved into Java.
Yeah, I was also a C++ developer, but not a commercial one. So I spent a lot of time of C++. I was a huge fanboy of C++. And then I discovered Java and then spent the entire time with Java by accident. But actually, I started with C++. And what we should actually invent, this should be with cooperation with all the conference vendors, is like, just if someone mentions now, Java is big, C and C++, just immediately show, 10 talks from 10 years ago, which said, okay, we had to move to Java from C++ because of this. Or 5 years ago, where we had talked like, Java is so fast like a system language, and we don't need the speed, and it doesn't have to be efficient. We need more productivity. Therefore, Groovy, Grails, and Scala and whatever are okay. So and now everything is forgotten, and this is another circle. And the problem a little bit is in the projects they listen to the talks we deliver. They're a little bit confused as well. So okay, what's going on there? We don't have the problem. Should we move or not? And there's a little bit of confusion going on, right?
Yeah, true. And it's funny that you mentioned the circle things. Like a lot of things do move in circles, do move in cycles. Like in one generation, like everything needs to be on the server. The other generation, things on the client. One generation, it's basically the databases are like NoSQL. Then there comes SQL. These people want more structure. Then the structure becomes too much, and they want less structure. So they move to a NoSQL thing, and it just moves in circles, basically.
Yeah. And for instance, so I do a little bit Quarkus right now in some projects, and people ask me, can you show us Quarkus? So what I do. But Quarkus is if you start with Quarkus, you just say, create, and it will create you a basic application with CDI and JAX-RS, basically. And then I already know what I need. So I already add, 5 to 10 extensions because I need them all the time, and they have something comparable to Piranha then. But I do it over and over again. So I already created my own archetype, and I think about create an extension because I'm just too lazy, to adding all the stuff over and over again. And from the Quarkus runtime developer perspective, this is the right thing to do because they think, there are some projects which just need, JAX-RS or just need CDI or just need whatever, which might be true. But in my world, I in 80% of all cases, I actually always need JAX-RS, CDI, then all actually basically mostly all microprofile specs because you need matrix, you need health checks, and fault tolerance could be nice. And probably we could talk about whether you always need transactions, because if you don't have something transactional, you can skip that. But and what I did, I added all the extensions, and it still starts fast. It's not like every extension comes with huge overhead. It's just probably a little bit slower, but from my perspective, developer productivity is paramount, and runtime, efficiency is somehow interesting, but not the most important thing, except for marketing, of course, right?
Yeah, indeed. And for actual real world applications, you do tend to use almost everything from the full platform. Like people always say, well, Java EE, Jakarta EE now is so big, you don't need everything. But quite often we, for any non-trivial application, we did tend to use almost everything. Like you build a typical web application, so you use JSF. Then you want some web validation, so you have beam validation. Of course, you need to save the stuff to a database, so you use JPA. JPA actually does uses transactions, so even if you have just a single data source, you still want multiple writes to the database to be transactional. Mm-hmm. So you do tend to use transactions then. You use CDI, of course. In our case, we often used EJB as well, because a lot of services are still not available as separate CDI services. So basically, just by building your application, by doing all the regular stuff that it needs to do, you do tend to touch on almost the entire API surface of Java EE. Yeah. And moving to something smaller, it wasn't really feasible, because we just used things of everything.
Yeah, and I have experience now in greenfield projects, so where they just started, so like startups, and they also use a lot. So we could probably optimize some things. For instance, in some startups we don't use JSF, so we have just REST and web components in the front end. But most of the startups are using JSF for back office applications, like CRUD managing is just great. Is for productivity is really, really good, and so we need something there. And also funny is if I tell startups, we can optimize if we move, just to telling them in advance. So there is something like Helidon or Quarkus. So if you like, we can look at this, and they are absolutely not interested, because they say, I don't care if the server starts very quick. They are really happy what they have. So this is actually funny, right? And recently I was in a larger company and in a workshop, and it is actually, we use Piranha, and all the Piranhas booted really slow. And on my machine, it was very fast. And there was another external guy, and I asked him, how fast is your machine? So it's similar to yours. And then he did some investigations. It turned out, the fault was the virus scanner. So the virus scanner scanned the whole thing twice, which Hello World deployed in 10 seconds on Piranha, which was way too slow. I said, look, if something would deploy 10 seconds I would never use Java EE. So forget it. I mean, this was for me unusable technology, right? And this is also, if you have such an environment, you could use whatever you like, and it is not going to be faster, except, your virus scanner won't scan, Node.js files, for instance. This is a different story, but this is a setup of your developer machine, and not fault of the runtime.
Right. So was that Piranha Micro then?
No, it was Piranha Full. So we use Piranha Full, and but the virus scanner not only scanned the Piranha Full, it also scanned the JVM, which loaded the classes. There was double scanning, which is crazy. So we saw actually how JVM, loaded the whole stuff, and it was very, very slow. So I don't think that, Piranha Micro would solve the problem there. And I mean, yeah.
Like Piranha Micro might even make it worse in that situation, because Piranha Micro first unpacks jar files to /temp, or the equivalent on Windows. And that might trigger extra scanning for the virus scanner.
Yeah, funny you said that, because they thought about introducing Piranha Micro. Like, for me, Piranha Full is great, and Piranha Micro just repackaged Piranha Full without OSGI. This is not a lot of difference from my perspective. I hope this is still correct. And
So at the moment, that's still correct. So we were moving to making Piranha Micro a more separate project.
Okay.
But at the moment, it's essentially Piranha Server and then repackaged indeed.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. So what I would actually wanted to ask you about, because I think you are behind Piranha Cloud, right?
Yes, that's true.
And I saw this on Twitter. It's like, what? This looks nice. What is it? So now the question is, what is Piranha Cloud, and how you get there, and what is your idea on what it is? So.
Okay, so Piranha Cloud is essentially a Java EE runtime, but reimagined a little. So the idea is that most Java EE implementations are like Java application servers. So meaning you have like an installed server, you have an HTTP connectors, you have deployment mechanisms, you have the ability to run multiple applications. There's all kinds of management stuff going on, which is handy if you need it. But if you don't need it, if you just want to run your Java EE libraries, then basically what you need is not an entire application server, but you want like a runtime. So initially the idea came forth from just wanting to run the Mojara jars. So it was used as a unit test framework of sorts. So you could immediately feed an HTTP request, say, into the library without having an HTTP server running, without having like a real connection going through a socket, only to go to a local host and feed back into the same process where the request originated from. So the idea, like I said, was to have like a unit framework test kind of thing, but then having a real server. So having a real embedded server, but without all the overhead. So then it essentially became more like a runtime instead of a server. And that's also where the name Piranha derives from. It's like from the old tale, basically, that a piranha could like strip a cow to its skeleton in like a few seconds. And that was the idea. We are stripping an application server to its most minimal skeleton. And that's where the name Piranha comes from.
Do you know actually the Piranha movie? Like Killer Piranhas or something. I saw this as a teenager, I remember.
I remember it, yeah. So
there was like a secret facility with piranhas, and they went swimming, and then they by accident opened the gates, and then the piranhas moved to a river or something like this.
Yeah, I remember that one vaguely, yeah.
Yeah, you see? So this is, so also history repeats, right?
Yeah.
So right now you are just, the secret facility without opening the gates, or the gates are not open right now. So, but, and what server is used as a basis? Is it Piranha server, or what is it, what you're using?
No, it's completely from scratch. So, the core, so to speak, like is a new servlet container. The servlet container is completely developed from scratch. And
so you developed from scratch a servlet container?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so I think it hasn't been done for quite some time. So all the existing servlet containers, Tomcat, JDE, Undertow, are relatively, or have been on the market for a relatively long time. Especially like the ones in AppSphere. Those are really old. So we basically try to do that from scratch. It's still a lot of work, so we're running the TCK against it at the moment in the Java EE 7 samples project. So we're slowly getting to be more compatible. It's of course a lot of work, so it's not yet fully compliant.
But this is actually a great opportunity to contribute, right? So if someone listener would like, to rerun the tests, find some bugs, is actually a perfect point to help you out. Is it possible?
Yeah, indeed. So the project is of course open to contributions. So it's still quite young. It's like the entire project as a unit test thing is a bit older. So that's approaching 2.5 years.
Wow.
Something like that.
So was it a secret project or?
Yeah, it was almost like a secret, but not secret as in secret, just secret in the sense that it was just used privately, privately as a unit test thing. And then at some point we thought, well, let's put a little bit more energy into this and make it a full compliant runtime, compliant with Jakarta EE, compliant with microprofile. And that's where the real push started. This was like a couple of months ago. And then we basically moved into making it more compatible with servlets, and then just the few small things we needed to run the Mahara jars, but just making it to an entire compliant servlet container. And we did some implementations of things that are not available in separate components. So for instance, Jaspic and Jack, which are now called Jakarta Authentication and Jakarta Authorization. We did separate implementations of those. And then on top of that, we run the existing Soteria library. That one is available as a separate component. And then it basically already passes a lot of the tests that we have for those things. So it essentially passes all the Soteria tests. It passes a lot of the servlet samples. So it's slowly getting more compatible. And it's also quite cool that in the sense of the security stuff, it's essentially the entire stack is our own code, since Soteria was mostly my own code, and not everything, but mostly. The two security libraries, we call them Ilios, and those ones are our own code, and the servlet things are our own code, so that the entire vertical stack is then our own code, which is quite nice.
Yeah, this is remarkable, and you are actually the one of the spec leads from Java E8, right? Security. Yeah, security, and you are also a heavy JSF guy, right? Omnifaces.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, no, just for the listeners, because they think, okay, who is that crazy and creates a servlet engine from scratch? It's like, some Java E8 spec lead could be successful with that. So what interests me with that is why you need servlets at all, because you could even run JSF without servlets, right? So you could run JSF without servlets, I think, and you could also.
No, you can't. Like
really, because this servlets, I remember there was always the idea that you can run it in a portlet environment, right? Something like this, because there's always the interaction with these faces context, right?
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention that indeed. So technically, indeed, it's portlets or servlets, and the entire spec mentions those two. So you get like a request, and it's either servlet or it's a portlet. So yeah, true. The other option could have been a portlet, but that's even a more unknown technology to us. So we went for servlet in this case.
No, sure. This is a reasonable decision. I'm just thinking about whether it would be possible to run JSF without servlets, because the faces servlet is not prescribed, right?
Faces servlet is that one is a requirement, but it's modified for portlets. Although I do have to admit I'm not entirely sure about the portlet case, if it runs the servlet, the faces servlet.
Yeah, because it would be interesting, to have a fresh. But regardless, it's interesting enough. So you started with servlets because why you need these servlets? Because you wanted to run your. So I assume JAX-RS and so forth will also be based on servlets then, in your case, right?
Yeah, so in our case, that's just the jersey. So all the implementation components for the specs that are available separate, we just use them. So that's things like jersey, Soteria, Mahara, what have you. All those things we, of course, don't re-implement from scratch. And yeah, you need some HTTP library thing to run them. So in case of JAX-RS, that one is completely independent of servlet. So you can essentially use whatever stack below it. But there's a lot of details that are not specified in JAX-RS. Those are the things having to do with deployment, having to do with the security setup at the lower levels, all the URLs, which you want to put security constraints on. All those things are not really defined by JAX-RS. So you still need something for that. And because of that, really, we thought servlet is still the best way to go.
No, I'm absolutely with you. So you also need servlets now if you would like, for instance, what I'm interested in. So I'm just thinking the time right now about that is to pushing in advance with HTTP2 content to browsers. So this is your servlet 3 technology, 3, right? Servlet 3 with HTTP2 support.
No, that's servlet 4.
4, exactly. Servlet 4 with HTTP2. And you could push in advance the static contents to your browser, and you could use it even in development mode, where your runtime would recognize changes, in a file system and push them in advance to the browser. So it could be actually an interesting story. So something like browser sync from triggered by an application server, for instance.
Yeah, so that's something that JSF was using. So JSF 2.3 was officially compatible with servlet 3, but it had a kind of hack into it, where it would also use servlet 4 HTTP push. So then it could indeed push resources that the server saw that the page, the view was going to use. It could push them in advance to the client, indeed.
Cool. So, so are you planning to have the entire runtime? So like Jakarta EE compatible, or what's your plan?
Yeah, so the idea is indeed to be Jakarta compatible at some point. So for Jakarta EE9, some of the more problematic things have been pushed out of the platform, like JSR 88 was already optional, I think, but JSR...
This is deployment, right?
7.
This is the deployment.
Yeah. Yeah, one was the deployment, the other one was the management. I was confused between the two. Like, the number is hard to remember. But I think 88 was the deployment stuff, and 77 was the management stuff. So those things have been pushed out. EJB has been simplified. So we're still not entirely sure what to do with EJB then. Our plan was to essentially not implement EJB, but to move ahead with the plans that are in Jakarta already, to rebase everything on CDI. So we're thinking about just providing the services that you would use with EJB, but then in CDI versions.
So in all my projects right now, what I can tell you, what we are doing. So we're using add stateless as performance optimization and convenience, because add stateless comes with implied, monitoring, pulling, and transactions. But if you have the control over the runtime, you can replace add stateless basically with a stereotype. Let's call it stateless CDI stereotype with transactional request scoped. So the request scoped will be a little bit slower than EJBs, but it really depends on the runtime. So I would just support add stateless, and if possible. And then the next problem is going to be startup singletons I use a lot, and schedulers. So this is what most projects are using, and everything else is not that critical.
Yeah. So we had something like that when we started with our Sieve website. It was a long time ago. It didn't went really far, but we had that for some point. And then the idea was, as a greenfield project, to not use EJB and to immediately move everything to CDI services.
Yeah, you're right. So this is actually the right direction. But if you get your first clients or customers, the idea would be to provide like EJB compatibility layer, right? Where
yeah. So we had that. So Sieve was our own website that we started. I think we had a talk about that back then. It was like in 2015 or so.
Yeah, exactly.
So then we thought, okay, EJB is a bit in the history of things. Let's start with CDI right away. Do everything in CDI, don't use EJB. But we did needed the services, so we kind of implemented our own CDI compatibility layer for that. So we implemented things like at asynchronous in CDI. We implemented the kind of pooling for beans. And this was actually meant at the time to be pushed or to proposed for Java EE 8 at the time. But then, like, everything went closing, but basically, how do you say this? Things were like going down. It was difficult to contribute those things.
Yeah, this was like this the time where Oracle became a little bit stale or lazy.
Yeah.
And microprofile started and about microprofile. So, are you planning to support all the small UI microprofile implementation, or what's your plan?
Yeah, so we're planning on doing that as well. So we just the other month had a JWT compatibility. So we actually run the TCK against Piranha and it passed. So that was quite interesting as well. And for JWT, we took essentially the piranha implementation and modified it a little bit to be standalone, which was actually funny in my case since I implemented that one for piranha.
Yeah, and well documented it in some blog posts. So
yeah. So it was essentially the code is copyrighted to piranha, of course, but then it's still my own code, so I know everything about it. So we took that implementation, forked it to omnifaces, and then modified it a little bit to be standalone, usable in Piranha.
What is the relation between omnifaces and Piranha?
Yeah, so essentially we there are mostly the same people behind it. So for a moment, we thought to put Piranha beneath the Omnifaces organization. But then at some point we thought, okay, well, maybe it's more a standalone thing. It's,
because if someone mentions Omnifaces, I always thinking about the let's say the killer utilities for GSF. And if you would start, your own cloud server from Omnifaces, I already know many people won't like the idea because people essentially there are developers who really hate GSF, Java Server Faces, and this is a fact. So I wouldn't associate Piranha with Omnifaces. Would be my strategy.
Yeah, so that was a bit of our reasoning as well. So we made Piranha a top level thing. And that we put it under the Omnifaces brand. And essentially, we did put some of the components, like the Elias library I mentioned. We put that one on Omnifaces. So Omnifaces is at the moment more than just Java Server Faces. It has separate libraries for security, for JPA. So, but there's still the historical connection with JSF, of course, and it's in the name Omnifaces, referring to Java Server Faces, of course. So that's a bit of the struggle with the parent, really.
Yeah, it's exactly my case. I really like EJBs because they were fast. But if I mention EJBs or enterprise, people always thought about Xdoclet and CMP, container managed persistence, or bin managed persistence 20 years ago, which I actually never meant. So I think wording, marketing and slides are very important, actually.
Yeah,
So we
indeed.
shouldn't underestimate that. This is also what I learned. For instance, I talked the entire time, about application servers, and I had a podcast episode, and I found it out. It was number 29 with Bruno Borges, and Bruno always mentioned runtimes, and I always talk about servers. And also there is in the mailing list from Jakarta at the beginning, someone asked, should we rename like servers to runtimes? And I say, who cares how it is called? Because for me, a runtime is a server, because the runtime serves something. But if you think about this, what server implies is that a server supports shared deployments, because it usually serves more than one app. It serves multiple things. And runtime implies one-to-one relation, what I actually did the whole time. So I don't know, I just did some research. My first blog post, I think, was like 2011 or 12. Like I said, one application server, one microservice. And so it was always one-to-one it was always one-to-one in all projects I was associated in the recent years. So all the Piranha projects and even Glassfish v3 and even Glassfish v2, there was one-to-one relation between the server and the application. And then now we shouldn't call it server anymore. It is actually a runtime. So, it started as a server, but it became a runtime, right?
Yeah, so that's a really funny observation indeed. And we actually used the exact same thing. We used Java EE as a library almost. We had this exact same policy of a one-to-one relation between the application and the server. And at the time, people were complaining about certain things in Java EE, like class leaks, class loader leaks, security between the separate applications. And basically, in our case, if you have this one-to-one association between the server and the application, all of those problems just go away.
Yeah, exactly.
People also mentioned at the time that you couldn't upgrade JSF, for example, in the server, because other applications might be using JSF and they would become unstable, or things would go wrong if one application needed, like say JSF 1.2, and the other needed to do 2.0. But then we said, well, if you have this one-to-one relation between applications, you simply don't have this problem. You can just upgrade JSF at will. It doesn't matter really. Yeah,
and people, if I mention it, say, but we have one-to-one relation because the server is not capable to handle more, and this is not true. It's what happened in the recent years. And in my world, it already happened with Glassfish v2. The server became so fast and so small, so that the optimization, to starting one server and shipping multiple wars to a single didn't make any economical sense anymore, because you could, save per microservice, let's say 60 or let's say 200 megs. Let's say it's 200 megabyte of RAM. But if you a mid-range project has, let's say, 20, 30 microservices, so you will waste 6 to 10 gigs of RAM, which is actually for an enterprise company is nothing. So if you think about this, and even if you are a startup, you can absolutely pay it. It's not like you will lose hundreds of euros per month because we are using application server. It's actually, we did the math multiple times, and this is a very small amount of money which you can save with shared deployments. So, and therefore, because it didn't make sense, and you get a lot of benefits, so we just did it, right?
Yeah, indeed. So, like even with the smallest startups, we were basically always able to have this one-to-one relationship. I think only like one case where they had a server that was like really over proficient, that fairly small server running like 8 or 10 virtual servers on them, that to create another virtual server on them for a small application, that was a bit too much for them. I think in all those years, it was like one of the only occasions where we ever run separate applications on a single application server. Mm-hmm. But in most normal cases, it was like always one server, one application, and one virtual server, really. So.
Yeah, and this is why I also talk now about runtimes, actually, because there's no more servers. And the funniest thing is, what I remember is a project in Switzerland, and I don't know why I remember, because it was crazy. There was I don't know when was the time frame, but I assume like around 2009 to 2013 probably. But there was like lightweight runtimes, and what people meant is they used Tomcat or Jetty, and it was and then they packaged everything to a war and shipped their war to Tomcat. And in this particular case, the Tomcat was like 10 megs on disk, and the war, I actually forgot, was either 50 megs, but I think it was a half a gig, 500 megs, because 50 megs would be nothing special. And this, if you think about this, I mean, then you save nothing, right? Because if you would ship multiple wars to a Tomcat, it doesn't make any sense at all, right?
No, indeed, and it's almost like you're shipping the entire server, the entire runtime.
Yeah, the fat
all
jar
libraries within the bar.
Yeah,
essentially.
A question. Hopefully, I get the right answer. Will you also separate the runtime from my war? So if I will ship, my application to Piranha, is there any chance, to keep separated the Piranha from my code, or will I have to package everything to a fat jar, fat war, or something uber fat, or whatever it is called?
No. So, the idea would be that we have essentially multiple versions of Piranha.
Mm-hmm.
So there's Piranha Nano, there's Piranha Micro, there's Piranha Server.
So go through this. What is the Nano?
Yeah, so Nano is essentially the original Piranha. So that's just the unit test framework-like thing.
Okay.
So you don't have the server, there's no HTTP connector running, there's no deployment, there's nothing. You essentially just have Java EE or soon Jakarta EE as a library. So you just instantiate an HTTP servlet request as an object.
But this is great. So this is like Helidon, what they are doing. So you can create your own main method, and then I can just use, Piranha Nano and boot everything by myself.
Yeah, so it's the lowest level of things. So you need to instantiate everything. You don't have any annotation scanning. You don't have any deployment. There's no HTTP connector. So it's just a main method where you instantiate and configure what you need programmatically, and then you just run it. So indeed, it's a bit like Helidon SE. But then for a Jakarta Java EE.
Wait a second. Sorry for the interruption, but I already know some use cases for me of that. And what I do a lot is I write a small command line interface tools. Sometimes are just like batch jobs, and sometimes are runtimes. Some are runtimes. So, for instance, what and a Jotanizer, what I created, I just created just with plain SE because I wanted to have a jar, executable jar at the end. But what I always missed is a little bit more infrastructure, like a little bit, CDI would be nice, so I don't have to write the constructors. And a configuration would be also nice, where I could, for instance, convert the arguments from the main method into config properties, as injectable config properties. So actually, I could use Piranha Nano for that, right?
Yeah, indeed. So that's the idea. So the entire programming model itself is not new, of course. It exists in many frameworks.
Yeah, but the programming model is hopefully microprofile and Jakarta EE related, not that you are invented, injection annotations, right?
No.
Very good.
So that's indeed the main difference, or the major new thing here. It's essentially that Java SE programming model, but then applied to Java EE and microprofile. So that's the idea behind Piranha Nano.
And it's just already usable? So can I just start it right now?
At the moment, it's not super usable for external users.
Okay.
So we know exactly what we do, exactly what we need, but it's still very much in development. So if you would start looking at it now as a new user, intending just to use the technology and not to contribute to it, the probably not be that usable yet. So we think we still have a couple of months to go before it's like really open to external users to use in their projects.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what is the next level? So we have the nano level, and then the next.
Yeah. So the next level is essentially Piranha Micro. Piranha Micro. I'm still too much thinking about piranhas sometimes. So it's Piranha Micro, and Piranha Micro is essentially a full server thing. So it has an HTTP server running. It has
that's your server, right?
Yeah, so it's the smallest server that we have.
Yeah, but this is what you wrote from scratch, right? So it's your HTTP servlet implementation.
Yeah, so it's the HTTP servlet implementation. It uses Hetty or something else for the HTTP low level things. Mm-hmm. And it has this concept of a deployment, but it can only run one application. So it has no features for running multiple applications. You can't undeploy. So it's basically run a single WAR file. Mm-hmm. And it is not like a full server, but it's like a small mini server, microserver, just to run a single VAR application. Mm-hmm. And the special thing that we have in Piranha Micro is to load all the jars that it needs directly in the memory, and also run the jar files with a class loader from the memory. Mm-hmm. So a lot of other runtimes here, things like Spring Boot, things like Piranha Micro. They, like I mentioned before, they unpack the jar files that they need to a temp folder, mm-hmm. and then point a URL class loader at them. Mm-hmm. And in our case, you run them directly from memory.
So you load so you have like a virtual file system or something, or you load the jars into memory and then you read from memory, right?
Yeah, so we have a special class loader, mm-hmm. and it runs everything from memory. And there's a special plugin for CDI, which does the scanning for annotations, and it is also capable of detecting these from the jar files which are in memory.
What would be cool is you are writing your own class loader, so you could actually expose Prometheus metrics to see how many infrastructure code was loaded on how many jars, wars, or bytes were loaded from the application, and to find the metric, because it could be really interesting.
Yeah, so there are some options there which we haven't explored yet, mm-hmm. But essentially we're having like a small isolated class loader, so it's mm-hmm. not that big. It's not like OSGI level big, but yeah, you could intercept a couple of those things.
Yeah, because you are reading from your own space, so you could just expose metrics. 20 megs loaded from war, and 500K loaded from our Piranha implementation. So this could be the idea.
Yeah, and the other nice thing about that is that.
And what you could also do, this will be more interesting, bytes per second. So how fast was it loaded? So you could recognize that you had a slow hard disk.
Yeah, you could do things like that, I guess.
Virus scanner detector, it's like, hey,
something's wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So the other thing there is that for the loading of the jars, we actually use the shrink wrap Haven plugin, mm-hmm. so to speak. So like all the jars are loaded via Maven, essentially, mm-hmm. Which I think none of the servers has done before. So it has no concept of a disk. It has no concept of a network. It just goes to the Maven API and says, give me the jars that I want. And then via the Maven configuration, you can point it to the disk, or you can point it to your own access, or they can come from Maven Central. So it really has no concept of a file system or anything.
It happens, so if you install the runtime, so if you ship it in Docker container, so you will have to preload the jars somehow, because you cannot expect that, I will always make the port open to fetch the jars. So what's the idea if you run it in Docker container?
Yeah, so you can, of course, always point it to an existing Maven repo. This could be just a local thing on your file system. So if you would ship it in a Docker container, which is, of course, a prime use case these days, then you would essentially have this local Maven repo in the Docker container, which happens to be on the file system then.
Oh, so we can put it to the base image, actually. So we can prepare, that's actually nice. So what we could do, we could have a Docker build, and in the base image, I could run a Maven, which fetches all the dependencies I need in advance, creates in the M2 repository, and the our Piranha image inherits from the base image, and there is already everything there.
Yeah, indeed. So that would be the idea. So you can put the M2 into your base image. So that would be the Docker use case. On your local computer, you could just fetch everything live. So you ship a tiny small runtime, which is essentially just a few classes, and it fetches everything from Maven. But if you're in development, it would fetch the things from your local M2. And you're quite flexible in configuring where exactly it gets things from. But if you don't want to be flexible, and just say, okay, just get them from wherever you can, there's always the Maven Central for fallback.
Yeah, but it's actually a good idea, because so if I'm loading my project into, let's say, NetBeans, and I start Maven. So it downloads everything in M2, and then if I start a server, it already has everything, right? So I only have to use the Maven conventions or share the settings XML, and it will work out of the box.
Yeah, so that's indeed the idea. So you would only ship the tiny small runtime, and then it could fetch everything from Maven Central, and you would have everything out of the box still.
So you have probably some numbers already. So if I have a simplistic application, like say JAX-RS with 2 injection points and let's say 1 interceptor, how fast does Piranha boot? So how fast is it?
Yeah, so there's essentially, in that sense, depending on which version you use, there's no boot time. So with Piranha. Yeah, so I would want to say if you would use Piranha, so not the Piranha, but the Piranha, it would do a full boot of things. With Piranha, you would not really boot with Piranha Micro. So you would still have all the libraries there, but the boot process, like reading XML files, reading configuration files, that would not be really there. So you save on that part. With Piranha and Nano, you would have not even the configuration at the time that's spent on reading the XML files from the application, since you would assemble them all programmatically. So a lot of things that normally happens during boot in Wildfly, in Piranha, all those things would not happen. But still,
yeah. But at one point of time, you have to know the metadata. So if I hit the server the first time, you will have to read the metadata in order to route the request to the proper path, right?
Yeah. So in Piranha Nano, all those things would be configured programmatically. So you would set them up in advance, which at the one hand means you have more overhead in starting your code. So it's you could say it's less productive, because you have to set all the routes, set all the metadata Essentially, you have to set them programmatically. So that's a bit more work for the developer. But there's no scanning going on. There's no XML files that needs to be parsed. It's just a small amount of code where you set all those things that runs.
But what you could do actually, just an idea, what you could do, because we know the conventions from Microprofile and Jakarta EE, we could start Nano first with a little bit overhead, and you could have external tool which will generate the code you mentioned right now, the routing configuration and so forth, because all the application servers know that actually. It's not like you have to configure it. This is the well-known convention. And because you don't like to scan, we can have, like a learning mode where you start Nano in learning mode, it scans everything, and then it generates bytecode, and the bytecode is the metadata you mentioned. And then the next time, it just loads the metadata and should be fast, right?
Yeah, so it's a bit like how Piranha Micro works, not exactly with the learning mode, but it uses the same API that Piranha Nano has, but then it does do some of that scanning in the application. Mm-hmm. So they essentially build on top of each other, and Micro builds on Nano, mm-hmm. and they use the same API. So all the things which are in other servers, internal APIs, mm-hmm. to set the things that result from web XML scanning, from the annotation scanning. All those things are the public APIs from Piranha Nano.
Okay, so this Piranha Micro is like Nano with the learning mode or applied conventions, right?
Yeah, so a bit like that, the applied conventions. Yeah, so it does all the scanning, it does the web XML loading, and it converts all those things in metadata indeed, and then it calls the same APIs that you would also use yourself. Mm-hmm. You're just using a Nano directly. So
what you could do in future if you have time, so you could do something what Quarkus does, that you can optimize everything at build time and then ship with static dependencies, right? Would be also thinkable.
Yeah, so we were already thinking about that indeed, but that's of course also a lot of work still, and we still.
Yeah, sure, but it's possible. So this could be like,
yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of things we could do, and of course there's only so much time that you have, and it's also for both of us now. So we're working on this together with Manfred Riem.
Oh, perfect! This is the MVC guy.
Yeah, so he's previously the MVC guy. He worked on JSF as well. Mm-hmm. He was the JSF Cocoa spec lead for a long time. Mm-hmm. The more implementation guy as well. Mm-hmm. So we're working on this together.
Cool.
But for both of us, it's an after work thing. So there's the day job, and then we get home. Or in my case, when we work from home, it's like customers are done, and I move to my own project.
Yeah, that's where you spend, 8 hours at your work, and that's productive, and then the 2 hours at night you are hyper productive, right?
Yes, exactly.
Your clients are not listening, so.
Yeah. That's a bit the thing, but then you still have the experience from the day job where you run into certain issues, and then you think, hey, this would be quite easy if I could do this or if I could do that. And then, like all the things you learn in the day job or all the issues that you encounter, those are the inspirations for your own framework.
Yeah, and time is actually a strange thing. So what happened to me multiple times, like, I'm the whole day in the projects. At night I fly somewhere to a conference or whatever, and then I just spend a few hours in the airplane and in the hotel, and then I'm hyper productive for unknown reasons. Probably because this is dead time. There is nothing else to do, and now let's do it. And if I'm at home, so you already think it's probably not a very good idea to focus too much on the nice project, because you have also to document stuff or answer emails or whatever. And this is after work could also mean, this is the new big thing, because there are lots of stories where like, pet projects became the main thing. So it's not like something uncommon.
Yeah, so that essentially happened with Soteria, essentially. So Soteria was essentially based on omnisecurity, and omnisecurity was the thing that we basically learned when we had to add security to the Sieve website. And then all those things I encountered, all those things I run into, I put into the omnisecurity framework.
Yeah, and now it is like, all major companies are running your code, actually, your idea. So it's remarkable.
Yeah, that's quite remarkable indeed. So I even saw the other day that Tmax-Soft, which makes this Korean application server, they use Soteria as well. So I was like, hey, it's essentially the national server of South Korea is running my code as well. I was like, hey, cool.
So your Soteria code, this is the Java EE security extension, and it is an old project. We have OAuth and JSON Web Token and custom, authorizations, and your code is always, mentioned indirectly because we have to use it or extend it or whatever. So I think this is one of the major contributions to Java 8, actually.
Yeah, so this was actually quite a cool thing. Of course, there's contributions by other people as well, but it's largely based on omnisecurity. So it has all the same patterns, all the same ideas, and it's, like I said, it's quite based on real practical application development. So at the time that we were building Soteria, it actually used the alpha versions, the beta versions in real applications. I could feedback immediately what the real application needed back into spec and into Soteria.
Yeah, we talk about that in the episode 24, Java E8 authentication and authorization. And by the way, do you know when it was? When we the last time met and talk about security?
The last time we talked about security was I think a year ago.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. It was exactly 1 year ago. So it was amazing how time flies.
Indeed, yeah. So then I was still in the UK, and we had the 1 hour time the difference.
Yeah, and where are you now? In the Netherlands?
Yeah. So I'm now in Holland, in the Netherlands.
Hey, cool. And so we discussed the micro. So micro uses nano. And what is the next level? Macro?
Yeah, so we thought a lot about the name. Macro indeed came up.
This would be a bad idea, I think.
Yeah, so that sounded a bit like it's really big and really, but then eventually we settled with the name server, and server is essentially a micro, but then with the ability to deploy multiple applications.
Oh, okay, so like sidecars and whatever.
Yeah, so that's essentially the thing that would be most like a traditional application server. So
and the name is great because this is actually the server. This is what we mentioned before. But still,
yeah, so we were just thinking about this nano, micro, indeed, macro, super. We were thinking about those names, and then essentially thought, okay, well, what is this thing? Okay, this thing is a server, and then okay, let's just call it server. And
so still, you didn't answer the question. So how fast it starts if it doesn't boot? Because how fast it becomes usable. So let's say I ship a JAX-ORES CDI applications with 5 classes and microprofile metrics, and if they are already supported in your case, how fast can I use the runtime? So how fast does it take until the live readiness probe says yes, it's usable?
Yeah. So with nano, I think it's like half a second in the unit test case. With micro, I don't know the numbers from the top of my head, so I have to recheck again. But I did see that when running the entire Java EE samples directory, in this case for servlet, was quite fast. And I have to think it was like 2 minutes or so for the entire thing where the other servers took like 4 minutes or something, but
Okay.
I have to recheck. I don't know it from the top of my head.
Okay.
We
And
were still, like I said, in the early phases of the project.
yeah, sure.
Focusing a lot on implementing all the APIs and getting all the function.
So, but the major effort was the servlet implementation, right? So this is where you spend the most time hacking and implementing.
Yeah, so the two major areas that I've been working on is indeed the servlet case. So like getting like all the APIs there and implementing the security bits, which is the own implementations of Jack and Jasper.
What are the functional benefits? So I would assume you did something special with security. So what features do you provide beyond, Jakarta EE and microprofile? Is this anything special you're thinking of, or?
Yeah, so the one thing I mentioned before was like the loading of the jars via Maven, special thing. The other thing is that the internal, which is also external jar format is Sorink wrap, the one used by Achillean. So if you create all those jars programmatically, you would use the exact same API that you also would use for Achillean. So that's a quite well-known API for people. So that's a bit of a special feature. The other thing is that for security, I think this is one of the first runtimes that doesn't layer the Java EE, Jakarta EE security APIs on top of an existing security framework, but it's you use them in the most direct way. So it's like you have the Jack and Jasper implementations on top of that Soteria, and that's essentially the native security system. While in things like Wildfly, it's essentially layered on top of Elytron, I think it's called. In Piranha, it uses Jack basically native as well, but Jaspic is layered on top of essentially Tomcat and Glassfish security. You still have the realms, you still have all these underlying bits, and in Piranha, that's like really the most minimal interface beneath it, but there's no native security framework running. And also special there is that in all the other servers, the servlet authentication mechanisms, which are the things like a form and basic, they have their own implementations, and then there's the Jakarta implementations from Jakarta Security, and those things are completely unified within Piranha. So if you would configure the servlet form authentication mechanism, you get the exact same as when you configure the Jakarta Security one.
So what you could do, actually, you can use the Piranha server as a gateway, which does, the flows for OAuth. So it will communicate with the backend, let's say Keycloak, fetch the token, and then just exchange the token back and forth. So this could be thinkable to do, right? So this would be actually a huge deal for enterprise companies, actually.
Yeah, you could do things like that. And like I said, the entire security system is quite small in that sense. You don't have like multiple paths. You don't have one security system layered on top of the other one. But this does make the entire thing a bit more lean and more flexible at the same time.
Yeah, this was your main goal in Java EE security. You always tried, to unify everything to one usable API, and now is the time to implement it from scratch, right?
Yeah, so that's exactly the thing. Like in Java EE 8, my focus was on making the API consistent. So like one API, one entry point, one thing to run and program things against. But then on the implementation side, in Piranha, in Wildfly, what have you, all the things are still like connecting all the separate APIs that were there for a long time. So the separate servlet API, the separate APIs for EJB, for JAX, and then in Piranha it's also unified as much as possible on the implementation side. So there's only the Jakarta implementation libraries that take care of the security stuff, and there's no connecting and no layering on top of all those existing systems.
Mm-hmm. So, is there anything interesting which we left from Piranha Cloud? We forgot to mention? Or?
Yeah, the thing is, of course, the main thing that we recognize the fact that the application server as itself is still usable. So we do offer that, or we're going to offer that. But there's also a lot of cases where bits and pieces of the application server have been replaced by other things. If you use a Docker container, if you use a Kubernetes, you don't need so much the deployment story. If you use the Docker, then also not always needed to have the HTTP connector running. If you use things like Azure functions, for example, you don't need the HTTP connectors all. So the idea is to slice off all the things that you don't need from a traditional application server. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you do need things, and then you can use them, but you don't have to use them. They don't come prepackaged if you don't want them.
So what you in future you could directly consume cloud events and convert them into whatever you like and provide such integrations, right?
Yeah. So we have an example out that was just blogged about by Manfred the other day, where he uses Piranha as an Azure function.
Okay.
And then he uses it with Piranha Nano. So then you don't need the HTTP stuff because that comes in from Azure. Mm-hmm. And Azure just calls the function, and the function then initiates the servlet stuff that's going to be used. But you don't need deployment, you don't need HTTP, you don't need anything traditional application server like. You just need the bare Java Jakarta EE functionality.
Yeah, great. So this is what I also played a little bit just for fun, with FN project. So they have like external, I think input event and output event or something like this. And you get then, the access to the streams. And I just immediately thought about, implementing CDI adapter, which actually worked. So I had CDI dependency injection from in FN project, but I had to write it by myself. In this particular case, I would just use Piranha Nano and do the same, right?
Yeah, indeed. So that would be the idea.
What is the code startup? So it is still great to say, is this below 1 second, right?
Yeah, so with Piranha Nano, depending on, of course, which components you use, they might have their own init things to do. Like if you
what I will do in your case, because you're building everything from scratch and you have your class loader, I would also provide statistics, metrics, open metrics, so microprofile metrics, which component loaded how fast. Because know that.
So that would be in Piranha Micro.
Exactly.
It's the one that's on class loader. But then for a Nano, it's just a complete flat class loader. So
but for Micro, you can do this. So you say, hey, look, we booted in 1 second, and the problem was, the slowest library was this.
Yeah. So that's indeed that maybe hasn't been mentioned too much yet. But then the major difference between Micro and Nano is also that Nano uses all the libraries that you already have on your class path. Mm-hmm. So if you just start a main function and you're like in a Maven project and you have like all those dependencies, then Nano is essentially just a library. It would use all the things that you have on the class path. Mm-hmm. While if you start a Micro, it's like a small mini isolated environment
Yeah,
that you have.
because you have your own class loader, right?
Yeah, you have your own class loader, and it's mostly, or even if you want to completely isolate it from the code that starts that thing. And then it uses some Maven to get the jars into that isolated environment.
Yeah, cool. So we covered the entire Piranha, right?
Yeah, so what's there at the moment? Like I said, it's still a fairly young project. So the proper Piranha Cloud started for like a few months. But the project itself, like just as the unit testing, goes back to like 2.5 years.
Cool. And people can hire you for Java EE and microprofile Jakarta EE consulting because you are a freelancer as I am. And
yeah, that's true.
And I assume the best possible case would be if someone will hire you full time to implement, some improved security, implement application from scratch, and you are allowed to use Piranha Cloud, right? This would be the dream.
Yeah, of course. So that would be, so at the moment, I was talking with 1 or 2 customers, might want to use it for an internal project, but because it's still so young, it's not really public facing at the moment, but there's some movement into using this Piranha as an actual customer site. But at the moment, it hasn't happened yet. So that it's still something that's a few months into the future.
But after the podcast, you get a lot of requests, hopefully.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, so indeed, as a consultant, you're always looking for new opportunities.
Yeah.
So that's always welcome, of course.
The question regarding micro, but the micro is very usable, right? So the listeners can just download the micro and just deploy Hello World and it should work.
More or less. So at the moment, micro has mostly been implemented as an Achillean connector. That was my first move since I wanted to run the Java EE samples against it. The complete standalone command line thing is still not there. So I have it on my local system, but hasn't been committed and published yet. So at the moment, the easiest thing to use Piranha Micro is via the Achillean connector.
Okay. And what is the URL? So do you have your piranha.cloud already reserved?
Yeah.
Oh,
so that's
cool.
That's the exact URL, piranha.cloud.
And where people can find you the easiest? So you are at Arjan_teams, right? Is it pronounced correctly? I forgot it. Arjan still? Or
yeah, it's Arjan times.
Times, exactly. This is
so
ARJAN_TIJMS. TIJMS. So
yeah. So it's pronounced a little like Times, like in the New York Times.
Yeah, Arjan Times.
But then slightly in a Dutch way, so Times.
Very good. And this is your main, and Omnifaces probably. If someone pings Omnifaces, it will probably, bump to you, right?
Yeah, so indeed, I'm reachable via the Omnifaces alias on Twitter, or the Arjan Times one. Look at them both. And now we have the Piranha one as well to look at.
Yeah, cool. And is Piranha Cloud a Twitter?
Yeah, so it has a Twitter account too. And that's essentially just Piranha_cloud.
Cool. Perfect. So thank you for coming back. It was really nice to chat with you again. And this is extremely interesting project. So I'm really glad something happens in Jakarta in microprofile space. And right now happens a lot, actually.
Yeah, thank you very much. So yeah, it's still, like I said, it's a project that's work in progress. And we hope to take it a lot further over the coming months. And it's going to be quite interesting, really.
Okay. Thank you and bye.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.